Okay, so this is, notice, this is, my little point here would be, this is prior to the 60s. It's not even 1960, most likely, right? Not even 1960. So could a black person, black child, swim in a swimming pool with a white boy, girl, people? Could the brown boy, Latino boy go and swim in a public swimming pool with white kids?
No, absolutely not.
At the time, no. Remember a theater? There was a special location for colored people.
Would that be near the film projector?
Excuse me? I couldn't understand the question.
I remember seeing a movie
You're talking about the
that
location.
was based in that time, and they showed the black people near like where the film was being projected instead in the seats.
I think I might have seen the same movie, and
it was a dog named Skip.
I think you are correct. I think you are correct. But it's just impossible to understand well the sentence unless we, place the sentence within context. Okay. So when she says you look like a negrito, right? She would say angry, sorry to be angry. She's keeping that racial segregation in mind. That's what she's got. But, and then when she goes about making this connection between color, skin color, complexion, and los braceros, the point that she's making, you are going to look like one of the poor, the Mexican poor. Why is that problematic for her mother? I mean, notice, one, there is racial tension, right? And there is, secondly, there is class tension, classicism, right? Class tension in there. Why this tension? How is this connection to braceros, in this case, hurting, his mom, paining his mom? Any comments on that?
Because they're not exactly poor, they're middle class.
Here we have the American dream again, I would say, she's pushing to become, for the family, her family, to become middle class. That's what she's fighting hard. And what was the first sign of this, motivation for me moving the family to a middle class neighborhood where they were the only Mexicans in the neighborhood? That was a move that the parents, I'm sure, thought a lot about. And when they were able to do so, they did it, okay? But that meant that they were, as you can see, they were no longer surrounded by any Mexican families or Black families or Latinx families, okay, Latino families. So we're kind of, they were kind of, the way he describes it, right? They were kind of isolated. Though in the Credo section, chapter, he mentioned the two churches, right? They're like the Gringo, as I think his mom may have been calling the church, the Gringo church, and the other little kind of quaint Mexican church that also were attending. So I suspect that nearby there were more Mexican American folks. Okay, I don't know which side of the city, right? But there is something he doesn't tell us. Okay, because if not, how was that church to be nearby? And I don't know how close to their house it was. So what I'm trying to say here I said, right, I'm going to repeat myself. She's pushing hard for her kids. Remember, how many siblings? 2 more, 3 in total. And he was the youngest, which is important, I think, for families and for education. So he's pushing for the middle class dream, right? And that's why, so there was one move, social class move, right? And more, bringing the family over to this location. Secondly, placing the kids in a Catholic church, not in public schools. Second decision, second crucial decision. Now, the Credo chapter then becomes important in the sense that the family felt that the Catholic Church would connect to part of their ethnicity and beliefs. Okay, if these are nuns, right, and this is a Catholic Church, then we will connect, we will make a connection because we participate in this tradition, religious tradition, and we'll kind of feel comfortable. We'll know that they will be taking care of our kids. So that was an important reason. Not only that it was a private school, but indeed that it was, I think, a Catholic school to send them to that specific school. So decisions, seeking after social improvement for the family. But notice how she's fighting, because when she sees, her own boy coming back, this is very scary and threatening. You're gonna look like one of the poor. And then up above, right? You look like a negrito. And in here, I need to, because there's gonna be the mention of a negro in Spanish, okay? Later on, because we're talking about complexion, so the word will appear in Spanish. We need to explain this. We need to explain this word. And why do we need to explain it? One, because it's not English, but secondly, because the word is surrounded by the English mind or mindset, or the word that we all know about, okay? The N word. So this word needs an explanation. This Spanish word needs an explanation. The word in Spanish, as most likely negro means black. But since the word is surrounded here by English, and English created the N word, American English, as far as I know, right? It resonates somehow when we say negro en español, okay? Negro in Spanish. It kind of brings together in the English mind the slur, the awful word. And so it needs to be clear for you, for the class situation here, in my view, that the word is coming from a different culture and a different set of options in the language in Spanish. And therefore, it does not mean, it's not the slur, right? It's not the awful put down, okay? Because Spanish would express the N word in a different fashion with a phrase, okay? To despise people who are black. But in Spanish, there is no N word, okay? That's an American, it's the result of the American culture and clash and racism, to put it bluntly, okay? Without that explanation, okay, I think we may be mistaken in understanding what they are trying to say, the characters. But they are so much aware of what is going on at the time, in the 50s, and the beginning, and then the 60s. And he's so aware, okay? He's so smart, as you know, that he is always kind of suggesting situations, but not necessarily making them explicit. So don't fall in the trap of not putting back into the situation the context, because he's requiring you to do it somehow, okay? So to finish my comment about this page, notice that he also says the word paradoxically in the last fragment that begins Los Braceros. Notice how that he includes this sentence that will be very important for the rest of the chapter. But paradoxically, also powerful men. Men, the braceros, the Mexican workers, right? The seasonal workers coming to the States to work. Paradoxically, also powerful men. They were the men with brown muscle arms I stared at in awe on Saturday mornings when they showed up downtown like gypsies to shop at Woolworths or Penny's. There was fascination in this little boy about this, Mexican workers, about Los Braceros, about how strong they were and how different they were. And notice that he uses the phrase like gypsies, which already kind of exoticizes them, but it sets them up in the imagination of this boy as something even like kind of magical, okay? Who are these amazing men, braceros, okay? So instead of rejecting them, he feels a strong attraction towards braceros. And this is part of the beauty of the book. Some of you were commenting on your quotations, that he gives you this feeling that emotions are encountering emotions, right? Rejection, it's, what is it? It's meshing into love or amazement and wonderment, but the emotions are coming together throughout the book. And that I think makes the book very compelling as an autobiographical narrative. Without this strong stream of emotions coming together, the book becomes maybe some kind of document, but not necessarily pulls us in, okay? Because we are, after all, emotional people. Okay, and then so that's my comment on the first page. Page 115, and yours is 124. My older sister never spoke to me about 124. So we're jumping lots of pages to go to your page 124. Well, not that many, I'm sorry, but mine is 115. Okay, so he starts talking about now in detail about his dad, his mother, his siblings, and sisters, brother, right? And he also keeps talking about complexion. What was most striking to me was his description of his older sister. So I want to kind of stress that moment in the book, because again, right, this is in the context of the 50s. He says about his brother, my older brother has inherited her good looks. When he was a boy, people would tell him that he looked like Mario Lanza, and hearing it, he would smile with dimpled assurance. So handsome boy, right? He looks like an actor, a well-known actor in the movies. That's what they are saying. Then he says on page 115, in my case, his complexion never darkened like mine, establishing immediately a difference between the two of them. My younger sister is exotically pale, almost Asian. Then he refers to his own face, mournfully long in the classical Indian manner. My profile suggests one of those big-nosed Mayan sculptures. And yes, if you take a look at the Mayan sculptures, that's exactly a very good description. Then we are Mexicans, my mother and father would say. This is a beautiful moment too, okay? Because if you think that he's trying to deny his inheritance or ancestry, this is a very important moment for him. Many Chicanos accused him precisely of that, okay? Of rejecting his ancestry by talking against bilingual education, one of the points he makes, right? And he says, my mother and father scorned those white Mexican Americans who tried to pass themselves off as Spanish. What does he mean by that? When he says to pass themselves off as Spanish, how do you read that, Kels?
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you said?
Yes, the sentence reads, my mother and father scorned those white Mexican Americans, white between quotation marks, Mexican Americans who tried to pass themselves off as Spanish.
Mm. So
what does she mean by that? Or he mean, I'm sorry. What does he mean?
What he means is like they thought it was wrong that they were trying to pass them. His parents thought it was wrong that they were trying to pass themselves as Mexican Americans.
No, because she's not noticed. She's saying Spanish. What does she mean by Spanish in this context? That's the question.
She's referring to like Spaniards, like European Spaniards, correct?
Yes, exactly. So people who may look white, or to be more precise, because this is a very important topic, you know, in African American studies, and if you will, also in Latinx, Latin American studies, passing. And we're going to talk about, of course, racial passing. This is crucial for African American studies, right? Passing, but racially passing. In Latin America, I would say what passing, it's more like a class situation passing, okay? Pass as a person from a different class, the elite, if possible. Polishing your language, dressing up, you know, being not ostentatious, and so on and so forth. Passing, social passing. But in this case, we're talking about racial passing because this, again, is a major topic in America. So yes, pass as European. I wanted to, for someone to comment on this because we have all this confusion in the States, you know, oh, you're Spanish. They may say to me, and I know what they mean now, but it took me a while to figure it out. Because for me, always Spanish meant Spaniard. But I understand now, right? Spanish. Well, okay, but maybe I don't identify myself with a word, okay? And so on and so forth. But she means exactly that they're trying to, notice, they are Mexican Americans, Kels. They are already Mexican Americans, but they're trying to pass as white. So why is he making this? He is making this point about his mother right now, Jimena. Why do you think he needs to make this statement about his mother? Uy.
Well, that she's trying very hard to, you know, give her children the life that they deserve, or the life that as a mother, the life that they deserve. And she realizes that there's a lot of unrest among races and nations and things like that. So, and she sees it, so she doesn't want him to be unaware of that. But honestly, personally, I kind of think it's a bit harsh to tell to a young child. But that's just my opinion. But I think that's what she's trying to do, because she sees all the unrest and she wants to give her kids, the best life that she can.
I need to clarify something given your comment. You're saying that it's harsh to tell her child, look, they're trying to pass. They're trying to fake who they are. You shouldn't do that. Is that what is harsh in this case?
Not harsh necessarily, like not cruel, I mean, but like a little bit
for his sake.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth.
Oh, that's okay. I'm having words, but I'm trying to put words there in myself anyway. So no, yes, that's what I meant.
Well, nowadays, there are folks who say you better teach your kids from the start that this is going to be complicated, and if you're gonna tell them right away, okay, or at an appropriate age, because if not, they're gonna suffer the consequences of racist the bigotry. Okay, so you are better off telling them right away and so that you protect them. If not, they're gonna get in trouble. They're gonna get in trouble, okay? And you need to protect them. I'm just trying to make the case, okay, for the significance of this conversation, even for today's families. Just saying that. But no, I think there is an important reason here why he needs to say this, okay? It's because of what we need to connect the dots, okay? I'm trying to connect the dots. It's because of what his mother said before, and he shared that with us. So what did he share? That he was saying, you look like a negrito. And that could be a racist statement, right? So, wow, that's one side of my mom, right? In the 50s. Now, notice what he's saying about his mom. Well, but she also said, people like us are trying to pass us white. That's not our narrative here. That's not the way we want to tell our story, okay, as a family. So on the one hand, we have that apprehension about you're going to look like one of the braceros, okay, the poor Mexicans that come and go, right, and then who are aliens, because this is a major point for the chapter, right? When we end the chapter and he goes to work over the summer at this location, again, we have quote unquote los braceros in there, right? The Mexican workers who he will approach, right? To say something because the boss has told him, go and say something in Spanish. And the boss assumes that Richard Rodriguez speaks Spanish. And he's very hesitant about going to talk to them, but he says to himself, well, it's gonna be one sentence, which tells you a lot about his Spanish as well, right? Because he's been saying, no, I kind of became bilingual in high school. But notice, no, not necessarily. Or the extent of his Spanish, it's minor, it seems, up to extent. Okay, this confuses me in the narrative, okay, that he puts together. Up to what extent he actually is able to understand Spanish or produce it. Understanding it, it's easier, okay? You can understand the language. It's more complicated to produce it, okay, in writing or, orally, speaking the language. So that's a kind of confusing situation for me, okay? How much Spanish he actually is able to produce. But the point is, he needs to rescue his mom and his parents. I think in this case, his mom, because he doesn't want for the reader to believe that his mom is simply a racist person, or also a classist person, okay? You're less because you're poor. Notice what he says next. My parents would never have thought of denying their ancestry. I never deny it. My ancestry is Mexican. I told strangers mechanically, like I didn't care, right? Okay, it's a fact. Yeah, I'm Mexican. Which is a lot. He says it like very cool, right? But again, go back to the 50s, 60s, right? Put the context in, and that tells you probably a lot about his character, as you have mentioned in your comments, okay, for the quotations. Because at the time, maybe given the push towards assimilation, right? And assimilation, like become quote unquote white, was such that maybe a good number of people were trying to pass. But the 60s, right? The 60s with the Chicanos are saying, we are not gonna pass. We don't intend to pass us, who we are not. We're Chicanos. The very name of the social movement, right, tells you right away, we are not passing. We don't want to pass. That's a trap. That's a trap of assimilation. That's a trap in American society. And we're not gonna buy into it. We're not gonna buy into it. So the risk for Richard Rodriguez, who doesn't see himself as a Chicano, is that we're gonna tell him, okay, you're trying to pass, right? You are brown on the exterior, but white inside. Chicanos telling him, right? But notice, he's saying, my mom never said that I should say, I'm not Mexican. And I said it over and over. So he's arguing against, that shadow hovering over him of the Chicano community, telling him, you are selling out. You're trying to pass. You're trying to pass all the time, right? And here is his answer. My ancestry is Mexican. Notice how I'm trying to put each segment into the context of the situation, okay? When I comment on the quotation, I put the context back in, right? And this is my comment. So I don't necessarily go describing each line of the quotation, necessarily keeping it like within this little box. No, we need to explode, make the box explode, right, into the context and bring the context back in for your comments. At least I hope you aim for doing that. But then we have the comment about his sister, and we need to explore this as well, because this is part of the complexion chapter and what he's trying to do, okay? Again, how does he see race? How does he see coloration? How does he see color? How does he see brown? How does he see his family, he himself, right? And what are the complications for this boy? How does he see himself going through this process of awareness, right? Let's put it bluntly. I don't know what is happening with my computer here. Racial awareness, okay? Complexion, he's saying complexion awareness, complexion awareness. I need for someone to read the quotation or the segment. My older sister never spoke.
I'll do it, Professor.
Go ahead, thanks.
My older sister never spoke to me about her complexion when she was a girl, but I guess that she found her dark skin a burden. I knew that she suffered for being a
N-word. Don't say the word.
N-word. As she came home from grammar school, little boys came up behind her and pushed her down to the sidewalk. In high school, she struggled in the adolescent competition for boyfriends in a world of football games and proms, a world where her looks were plainly uncommon. In college, she was afraid and scornful when dark-skinned foreign students from countries like Turkey and India found her attractive. She revealed her fear of dark skin to me only in adulthood, when regarding her own 3 children, she quietly admitted relief that they were all light.
Yes, thank you. And I think that the last segment of the paragraph is very powerful. Could someone comment on that? The last segment of the paragraph. I mean, or comment on anything. Okay, let's focus for a bit on this segment. Comment on anything that you think is relevant within the paragraph.
So you're talking about where she confides in her brother, and she's happy that her 3 children have lighter skin than she does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she probably has relief because she doesn't want her children to go through what she went through. And so that's why she's happy that they have a lighter skin than she does. So they won't get as much as the picking on and racial, you know.
Yes. Yes. Kels, now one can say that because he's giving us a detailed description of the situation, right? That's an excellent explanation, and I agree with you. But the explanation that we have comes out of his detailed description, because if we were not to have that description, the kind of description, we could easily say that she's buying into coloration, into my kids. Oh, I pray, I pray that my children will be lighter. I pray. Because what is she denying?
She's denying who she is and her color.
And we get into the topic of self-hatred.
Yeah.
Self-hatred, which is important for this chapter, by the way, okay? Which is important for this chapter. She bought into the system, okay? At the top, lighter. At the bottom, darker. She bought into the system. And we found her guilty. But given your explanation, Kels, at the same time, we see the suffering. We can make sense out of what she's feeling and what she's saying because of what she went through and because of the compassionate, maybe, understanding his sibling has over her situation. Growing up, as a child in high school, and then, oh, I'm happy that my children are lighter. But still, that's very painful. Still, that relates to, the coloration system within the United States then, and within communities of color. This is a major topic for African Americans, but he somehow tells us that this may be also an important topic for the Latinx population, maybe Asian population, and so on and so forth, right? Because of the push, the push towards some kind of complexion in the States, okay? Some kind of complexion. Now, the fact that for me, the fact that for me, the fact that he uses the N word is important here because it means that he realizes the extent to which racism plays a role within the fabric of this moment, of this historical moment. So he's not shying away from, what is happening in terms of racism, right? And also maybe anti-racism, anti-racial, racist, what is it? Maybe it's too much to say movements or aspirations or activism and so on and so forth. But what I simply say, what I simply see here, you know, is complexity. And notice, it is emotional complexity, perceptive complexity about, you know, the situation for his family, and specifically for his sister. Interestingly, also, he sees himself, because he says his brother, right? Notice his complexion, his brothers, never darkened like mine. So he feels closer to his sister, older sister, somehow, than to his own brother in terms of complexion, okay? And he's trying not to deny that, which is interesting as well, to add more nuance to the situation, right? Wow. Okay. I think Lindsay is having trouble here. I'm going to see if I can address it. Okay. Oh, okay. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry to hear. Okay. Dorms are losing power.
Yeah, it seems like they lost power on campus.
Wow. Well, I hope it's not because we're talking about complexion. That is a joke.
And yeah, I still have Wi-Fi right now, but normally what happens is the power goes out, and when it comes back on, we normally lose Wi-Fi. So I just want to let you know.
Okay, so it's kind of wavering.
Yeah.
Unstable. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Okay, so let's go now to page 125. In your book, it's page 117 in mine. In public, I occasionally hear racial slurs. So how was racism affecting his own life in Sacramento? And up to what extent? What does he say about that? Okay. How were people surrounding him, looking at him being the brown kid in the neighborhood or at the school or outside in the streets? This is what this page will address. Jaylene, could you read, please? In public, I occasionally hear racial slurs.
Yes, it's on page 125, correct?
Let me see.
For the brown book?
No, for my brown book is 117.
Oh, 117, that's why I couldn't find it, okay.
Black book is 125.
Okay. In public, I occasionally heard racial slurs. Complete strangers would yell out to me. A teenager drove past shouting, "Hey greaser, hey Pancho." Over his shoulder, I saw a giggling face of his girlfriend. A boy pedaled by and announced matter-of-factly, "I pee on dirty Mexicans." Such remarks would be said so casually that I would quickly realize that they were being addressed to me. When I did, I would be paralyzed with embarrassment, unable to return the insult. Those times I happened to be with white grammar school friends. They shouted back. What does that word say? Imbued with the mysterious kindness of children. My friends would never ask later why I hadn't yelled out in my own defense.
Right. So how is he describing his own situation here regarding these slurs?
Well, he wouldn't really.
Racism. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you can continue. I didn't know if you were like having the question open for answer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think he was just in a state of shock because he was with other people.
Yeah.
And he didn't really think that they would make those type of comments because he was with his like white friends, quote unquote. But I think like saying I pee on dirty Mexicans, I don't really think one would really know how to respond to that.
Okay.
So maybe he was just in a state of shock and then he couldn't like defend himself, or maybe he just didn't want to spend time dealing with the people.
Well, he says, and I read, such remarks would be said so casually that I wouldn't quickly realize that they were being addressed to me.
I also think that because we already know he was so insecure about his skin tone, that once the comments were made, they weren't really like surface level things. Like it wasn't just like somebody walking by and being like, you're a bitch or something like that. It was like something that he was already really insecure about, so it affected him like deeply, so he couldn't like brush it off and be like, ha ha ha, like screw you, buddy. Like it was something like deeper than that to him.
Well, yeah, there's complexity in the situation because on the one hand, he says, I didn't quickly realize that those comments were addressed to me when they were said. And then he says, as you are interpreting the situation, when I did, I would be paralyzed with embarrassment, as Jaylene was also saying, right? Unable to return the insult. So are they saying it to me? Maybe not. And then, oh, they said it to me. And then that was his reaction, right? Embarrassment. But notice also that within the context, his friends will defend him. He wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't be quick to respond. He wouldn't find the words. But his white friends, and I assume they're white because he's not said that he's surrounded by, Black Americans or brown kids in the neighborhood, because they aren't there, right? So it must be white kids, his friends. They will defend him. They will say, yell something back right away. So he's kind of protected, and part of, feels that kind of solidarity within his own group of peers. That suggests to me that he's saying, yeah, some people would be that way, but at the same time, we have within my community people who would see me as their friend, their peer, their brother, quote unquote, and this is the point, there wasn't only discrimination against me, racist, put downs. No, there was much more, right? Because I had my community surrounding me. And this is America, where you have some of those, but notice, we also have people who will react for you, even though they are not Mexican, he's saying, in Sacramento, okay? For the Chicanos, the viewpoint would be a bit different. They would say, the system is against us. The system is clearly against us, preventing us from achieving an education. The system has been so far exclusionary, racist, and against our language, one component of our identity, against bilingualism, and so on and so forth. So there is a nuanced difference with Chicanos that I see in this description of his own situation. And later on, next paragraph, he is even explicit about this. In all, with the paragraph that begins, notice, in all, there could not have been more than a dozen incidents of name calling. And then his important statement here, crucial statement, that there were so few suggests that I was not a primary victim of racial abuse. Not the Chicanos, because the Chicanos would say, we're constantly, having to deal with racial abuse in the city, in the cities, in the locations we're at, in one way or another, okay, during the 50s and 60s. So it's like he moved into a location that protects him. It's like kind of a, up to extent, a safe haven, right? Not haven because we have racial incidents right here. But he feels protected enough to say, I was not a primary victim of racial abuse. He's saying during the late 50s, and I guess the beginning of the 60s. And we know how many clashes were happening during the 60s. And then I listened when my parents remarked that Mexicans were often mistreated in California border towns. So they were aware of what was going on. And in Texas, indeed in Texas. And I remember the video, right? Texas Rangers and so on and so forth, but that was way back when, up to extent, right? And also remember how they had to fight to be elected and then to fight to be really, what is it? To really become not only elected, but being in office, exercising the right to be, you know, the politicians at the time, if you remember that video. I listened carefully when I heard that two of my cousins had been refused admittance to an all-white swimming pool. Here we have the swimming pools, and that's what I was referring to it, okay? And that an uncle had been told by some man to go back to Africa. I followed the progress of the Southern Black civil rights movement, which was gaining prominent notice in Sacramento's afternoon newspaper. But what most intrigued me was the connection between dark skin and poverty. His mom, right? His mom is in his mind telling him there is a connection between, he says, right? Dark skin and poverty. And why dark skin in this case? Because he's thinking of braceros. And what was happening to braceros? Their skin was turning darker because they were exposed to the sun, working in the fields. So that was the complication here is not only that this is a, you know, a racial situation, but that for his mother and for himself, I guess, in this moment, there is a connection between poverty, social class, right, and skin coloration. You are going to look like one of the pobres, los pobres. This is what his mother would say, right? The poor, the Mexican poor. No. We fear that. We really are moving towards something else coming from a very dire situation, economic situation as Mexican immigrants. We really need for you guys to do what we couldn't do, what we couldn't achieve because, you know, it was not given to us. We tried our best, but your father just could get this kind of jobs. And you guys, because you're going to receive this education, because you're going to be part of the American, you know, society, American society, then you will do the impossible. You will be successful. You will integrate. And somehow they're saying in this way of presenting the narrative to you, you will be unlike us. You will have a different life. The American dream, okay? The American dream. But notice the tension of the family, which is we are pushing you, we are supporting you with all our might and hearts, you know, for you to have a different life. And so on and so forth, which means we don't for you to look like los pobres, okay? Like braceros. And he's even more explicit down the road here. because I heard my mother speak so often about the relegation, exclusion, right, of dark people to menial labor, braceros, okay? I consider the great victims of racism to be those who were poor and forced to do menial work. So I guess we could say, what would be an example of menial work or labor?
Well, the example it gives in the book is construction.
Yes, that's one. Anything
Working
else?
in factories.
Yes, indeed. And doing the same thing over and over and over, a very repetitive and tedious work, right? That doesn't imply thinking. I was thinking also about working at a restaurant, washing dishes. Okay. Now, there is something that I'm not saying that is very important here, because when they are thinking about braceros, they are thinking about people who are not citizens of the United States. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's an important part of the discussion here for how they will integrate into American society. So yes, we are immigrants, you know, we are becoming citizens of the country. You guys are citizens of this country because you were born here. And so we also want to distinguish ourselves, right, from those who come seasonally and then they go back. Notice that in this case, we're not talking about undocumented workers because the braceros had documents. There was a program in place for Mexican workers to come over and work in the fields. Now, we're not talking about the treatment given to braceros in the fields, right? We're not talking if they were exposed to, what is it? Pesticides, which was a big issue for, I would say, Chicanos and the Cesar Chavez movement, okay? Pesticides. And then environmental issues, right? Pertaining to that, connected to labor, okay? Labor. So I'm not even talking about that regarding braceros. But what I wanted to say is that they clearly, and he himself, remember when he goes back, again, let's refer to the end of the chapter, when he goes back, when he goes to work, this summer job, he clearly knows that these most likely undocumented workers working, either construction work, they are not documented. They do not speak, or they may have some English, right? And even when the boss, remember how the boss approaches them? Do you remember that moment? Do you remember the boss's voice? Can somebody remember that? Can somebody say something about that? Because it's Richard Rodriguez first saying, you know, a couple of sentences. But then the boss comes and he has some money to give the workers. But do you remember the voice he uses? Anybody?
I don't quite recall the tone of voice, but I know that he had paid them like less than what it was originally said. So if they were getting paid like $8, they would be getting paid at the end of that like less than what their said like agreement was.
Yes, and there is one statement, one sentence. I think the boss says something like, you know, in fact, the exchange rate will work in their favor. Okay, because meaning I'm paying them in dollars, and they'll go back to Mexico, and the exchange rate will work to their favor. He's condescending, and Richard Rodriguez is quite aware of this condescension happening there. But this is precisely his point. His point is, yes, they will be condescending towards you if you are an alien. Remember, alienation, alienated, how important this word is for Rodriguez? So all that his family is doing is to incorporate itself into the fabric of American society successfully, right? Because they are quite aware that were not that to be the case, they themselves becoming citizens of the country, right? They would be ostracized. They would be still aliens, right? Not participating as in the public arena, which is so important for Rodriguez, okay? We need to work towards having our own public identity. Private identity doesn't work for us as Mexicans, okay? And therefore, when the braceros are there and they do not speak fluent English, they cannot attain a public persona. They cannot participate in public society, okay? And defend themselves. They'll be treated this way. They'll be treated this way. And they will not be able to oppose the way they are being treated necessarily, right? Because they are like kind of in the shadows, and so on and so forth. So that's what his family, his mother is pushing the family away from as much as she can, but that's painful, okay? And according to his own description, you know, she's making such an effort to do that, that we know there's tension, okay? I don't know, a bolt of energy, you know, going through her body to make sure that her kids will become someone in America. There is a moment, let me see, I think we have some time, that is very painful and I don't want to skip it. When he starts shaving, remember that moment? I think we need to go to that moment. Let me see if it is page 133 in yours and 124 in mine. Let me see if that is the page. Yeah, this is the page. So please go to page, in my book, Brown, it's 124. In yours, if you have the black book, 133. I don't want to forget this moment because this moment is very powerful in his narrative regarding complexion. That incident anticipates the shame and sexual inferiority. That is the paragraph. Could I ask maybe Kaylee to read? Okay, the page in my book is 124.
Okay, thank you.
And in yours, if you have the black book, it would be 133, 133. Please, could you read? Kaylee?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That incident anticipates the shame and sexual inferiority I was to feel in later years because of my dark complexion. I was to grow up an ugly child, or one who thought himself ugly. Pharaoh. Do you want me to keep reading?
Please, yeah, we need now comes the interesting part. Now comes it, okay?
One night when I was 11 or 12 years old, I locked myself in the bathroom and carefully regarded my reflection in the mirror over the sink. Without my pleasure, I studied my skin. I turned on the faucet. In my mind, I heard the swirling voices of my aunts and even my mother's voice whispering incessantly about wine juice, solution, and dark Pharaoh's children. With a bar of soap, I fastened a thick ball of lather. I began soaping my arms. I took my father's straight razor out of the medicine cabinet, slowly with steadily deliberteness, I put the blade against my flesh, pressed it as close as I could without cutting, and moved it up and down across my skin to see if I could get out somehow less in the dark. All I succeeded in doing, however, was shaving my arm bare of their hair.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I think we can stay there because that's the description of what took place in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So what would your comments be regarding this specific situation in the bathroom?
He wants to get rid of his dark skin. He wants to be, I would say, lighter, like one of his sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the razor here a symbol? I'm just asking a question. To anybody, okay? Is the razor here a symbol of something?
I would say so because it's a symbol of him trying to like strip away his coloring, which relates to like his culture, and he's trying to like take that away from himself.
Yeah, yeah. Now the question for me when I first read this, years back, was how many children went through this?
From like my personal experience, I understand it. I don't think I've ever gone to the point where I've thought I'd hated myself or just kind of disliked myself, but I can confirm that it is pretty common amongst like Mexican American children, because it's hard to want to fit into a society that's kind of like growing up, you're told like not to be too like dark skinned, to be pale. Like that's the ideal image of it. So I can understand.
Yeah, and maybe the moment will be more relatable if for any reason, not necessarily because of complexion, we might have felt we were not projecting the image that society was maybe demanding from us. I don't have the right kind of hair. I don't know. I am small and frail. I have this illness and I cannot, behave in the same way that other people behave. Let me go to an extreme. I'm losing a limb. You see what I mean? So in many ways, yeah, this is regarding complexion and race. And the aim is to, what is it? Undarken yourself, something like that, to fit into a specific image. But it's ingrained in his mind, his heart, and so on and so forth. So this is also indeed true for the Afro-American population, the black community in the States, okay? And an industry was created towards, whitening your skin, as you know, and it still is in place. And not only in the States, by the way, as you know, most likely know, right? Like in the Asian communities abroad, this has been part of the culture as well. So it's international, it's international. Okay, I will not linger. I wanted to show you a segment of the video, but I couldn't because I thought it was more important for us to have this conversation about the chapter, right? But I'll see you next class. And before we finish, I will make sure to send you your quotes